disputes using game theory to incentivize correct case rulings. The result is a dispute resolution system that aims to render ultimate judgments enforced by smart contracts in a fast, inexpensive, transparent, and decentralized way. I'll turn it over to you, Federico.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I was here first time like 1.5 years ago presenting, and I was not here. I was doing this remotely, and I could see the faces of people like this crazy idea of like game theory. So I didn't have a very good answer back then because this had not been tested, but now it has, and I'm here to show you what we have found about how people behave in these situations. So first, very short introduction. There is this contract between this woman who's from France and this guy who's from Guatemala, and for like a website, and he delivers the product, and she's not happy. There is a dispute, right? Different countries, she's not going to court there, so it doesn't make sense for a $500 dispute. So what is they have used Kleros? How does this work? Imagine that she sends a cryptocurrency payment into a smart contract, and the money stays there as an escrow. And they both agree that if there is a dispute in their agreement, so there is going to be an arbitrator called Kleros, right? So there is a dispute. Kleros selects a jury of people who are going to analyze the product, and they're going to see the contract and decide who is right about this. In this case, so they decide that Alice won, and so the money that was held in escrow is sent to the winner, and so that ends the situation. Okay? Good. So, of course, you might have the question of how do you select the jury, right? And imagine this woman, she's in Myanmar, and she's a designer for a website, and she wants to make some money by being an arbitrator in disputes on websites. So she has to use this token. It's a cryptocurrency token called Pinakion. The name is based on the token that they used in ancient Greece to select jurors for trials. And so she has to put this token into a court. Kleros has different courts. One of them is going to be for transportation, for insurance. In this case, she's going to put the token into the e-commerce freelancing court. And each time you deposit a token, you get one chance to be drawn as juror for disputes in that court, right? So this is like the interface, what it looks like. So you have to select how much you want to stake. So she makes the deposit. Other people make the deposit. And let's say that 5 of them are drawn as jurors for that dispute, okay? So these guys will have the right to see the evidence and to vote on who is right. And the token that they deposited is going to stay locked into the court until a final decision is done for the case. So how do you create incentives for these people to do an honest work, right? Because how do you make sure that they don't just vote randomly like A, B, whatever? You want them to actually look at the evidence and be honest about the vote. And for this, we use game theory. This guy is Thomas Schelling, Nobel Prize in Economics 2005, and he developed this concept called focal points in this book. And focal points is about how people coordinate when they are in a situation where there is not certitude about how the other people are going to decide, and you have to coordinate in order to have some reward. So it's just an example here. If each of you have to decide on one square of this, and you make money if you choose what the majority chose, which one are you going to choose? Well, most people choose A6 because it looks special, right? Any of the squares is okay, but since I think that you think that I will pick that one, so we all end up coordinating that one. So another example, which one would you pick?
A nice one, like 1,000.
Right, so yeah, so that's the focal point in this situation. So people independently deciding, using the same information and coordinating in a way where they have an incentive to be like the majority. Okay, let's put jurors seeing the same evidence, the same case, and voting independently on who is right. And our hypothesis is that they will vote the truth about the dispute. Do you understand how this works? Yeah, because that's the Schelling point. That's the only way in which they can coordinate to earn the reward. So if you vote different from the majority, you lose the token you have deposited, remember, and you don't get a fee for arbitration. So if you keep playing this game many times, like voting randomly, over time you're going to lose more money than you make, and you're going to like run out of tokens, and you're going to exit the system. If you take your time, analyze the evidence, and vote honestly, then you're going to be with the majority most times, and you're going to make money, and then you're going to keep being a jury in the system. Use cases for this, like imagine e-commerce, small insurance things, utility disputes, basically small claims, right? And also imagine a tournament of like esports where you have to catch people who are cheating. So this type of disputes that are, oops. Is this okay? Okay. So basically small claims. Okay, this is a short introduction to what Kleros is and how it works. So let's see what we found in the empirical domain. We launched Doges on Trial, a first pilot in July 2018. In this pilot, like users had to send images of dogs into a list, and they were like juries that had to decide whether an image that was submitted was a Doge or not, right? So users could make a small reward for each image of a Doge that was accepted into the list. But the big reward here was if you got a cat into the list, like you send a cat and you have the jury accept this as if it was a Doge, then you could make $12,000, which is a kind of big amount of money for people in the internet, right? So this is the list of what people sent. So you see that these are like actually Doge images. So this is the jury vetted these images and let this in, and these are some samples of like images that were lost, so that were not accepted, right? It worked like perfectly. Like the list was populated with images of like what one expected to be there, right? And we made a number of attempts for trying to break the system and see how resilient it is. One of them is, imagine you're a juror and you get this this picture, right? So people were offering bribes to jurors to let the image in the list. This didn't work. This is another bribery attempt that also didn't work. And so, as I was telling you, it worked very well. The only case that was debatable whether it was a cat that got into the list or not was what we call the cat in the snow case. So some guy sent this, right? And the jury let this image in, and so nobody said. And then we get an email from this guy saying, "Hey, you owe me $12,000 because I got this image of a cat into the list. This is the image from another perspective." Right? So I told him, well, it could be this, but it also could be this, right? So we didn't know if it was a cat or not. So what we did is to make a Kleros trial where the jury had to decide if this image should be, if we should pay or not the $12,000. Because is this a cat or not? What do you think?
It's not.
It's not, right? Of course it's not a cat. For me, it's... So the jury decided that no. So the Kleros team won 2-1 in this case. So, but you know, it was hard one, right? It was a hard one. Another interesting thing is this image. So someone sends this. What would you do with this? Would you let this into the list or not? So no, right? It's not a Doge. So this was defeated. But then, if you went to Venice, so you know that this, who lives in that Palazzo Ducale? Of course, the Doge of Venice, who is like the president of the Venetian Republic. So someone sent this image. So what do you think now? This is a Doge or not a Doge? And remember, you have to think like the majority, because if you don't think like the majority and you vote differently, you lose your money. So what happened here is that it was accepted, right? But it was appealed. In Kleros, if you think that the decision was unfair, you can appeal, and then just go into another jury, which will have twice as many jurors plus one, right? And they're going to, or whatever this new jury decides, will overturn the previous decision. And in this case, the image was accepted again, right? And then someone else comes and send this image, and it becomes harder, right? Now, what do you do with this one? Because it is a Doge, or not a Doge, but people said, okay, but this Doge, like the spirit of the law was that the Doge was a dog, not like a Venetian Doge, right? And this was accepted, it was appealed, and then it was rejected. So all this Doge or not Doge image of Venice created like a very big discussions in the community. We have a Telegram group, and people were like arguing, okay, this is not the spirit of the law, or yes, but it's a Doge. So the community started to make the rules and see, okay, but if in the last image we accepted as a Doge, why wouldn't we accept this one? So it was like kind of some jurisprudence that started to be created in the community. Cool. So these are some numbers of what of money that went through the experiment. It was a lot of fun, but it was not the real world. So where is Kleros working now in the real world? You know, in the cryptocurrency industry, you have exchanges where people can buy and sell tokens. If you own an exchange, you want to make sure that the tokens that you accept are not scam, or they comply with some minimal conditions of like quality. So we developed this experiment, which is not an experiment because it's a product now, where like people submit tokens to be listed into the exchange, and the community, using this jury incentive system, decide which tokens should be accepted and which should not, right? So the community starts to be empowered to make this decision instead of the owner of the exchange. How does it work? Like, I want my token to be into the exchange. I send the token there with a deposit. So if the token complies with the rules that the exchange requires, the token is accepted and I get my money back. Okay, but so I send another token, but this one does not comply with the rules. So someone of the community can challenge my submission with another deposit. And then now there is a dispute between the woman and the guy about does this token comply or doesn't comply with the rules. And this goes to a jury. And if the jury rejects the token, so the guy who challenged it gets the money, right? So we launched this with a partnership with Finex, which is a very important exchange of cryptocurrency. And so these are some interfaces. They're nicer now, but this is how you can submit and challenge, and you put the money. And this is the list where you can see which tokens were submitted, were challenged. And what was very fun about this is that there were like very big discussions between like the submitters and the challengers. So one of the tokens that created a lot of the controversy was SpendCoin. Like, the guys sent the token to be listed. And look at the evidence. Like, these are PDFs, like 40, 50 pages PDF, like saying why it should be accepted, and the other say why it shouldn't be accepted. And this is the type of, this is all available if you want to read it. So why the challenger thought that this token should not be in the list. And then the defendant also had a PDF like refuting point by point why they thought it should be accepted. Another token where we found that like a big controversy, and it was appealed like 3 times, I think. And there was like, in this case, there was like $30,000 at stake because of appealing. There was like lots of deposit there. And then we saw some people who created like a kind of a law firm to make money with these tokens. So imagine I start checking each token that is submitted, I check it, and if I think it doesn't comply with the rules, I challenge it. And then this goes to dispute resolution, and then I make the case that this token does not comply. If I win, I get the money from the depositor, and it's like a couple $1,000s. So there's people already making money by like doing due diligence on the tokens that were submitted. And this is the traction we've had so far. This started like a couple of months ago, so it's not very old, but it's starting to get some traction. So it's used from the point of view of the exchange. It like cuts like the cost of doing due diligence for their because instead of having they get like 1,000 submissions a month. Instead of seeing all the submissions, the community solves 900 and then they have to check only the 100 remaining. Okay. About the team, so 2 co-founders, and the team is distributed everywhere, as you know. This is basically a team of computer scientists and mathematicians. If you want to learn more about what we do and the research we've done, you can download the book. I can share the link later. Colin wrote the prologue, so you have to speak well about the book. So yeah, this is already published. And we have also, this may be interest for you, we have a fellowship program where people can do research about different aspects of scleros. There is one guy from Stanford, Luis Bergosia, who is doing research. He's a PhD candidate at law school, and he's researching scleros. And you can research about the game theory. You can research about, is this legally compliant? Is this Alexei Gudkov's guy who is researching? Okay, what is the interface between scleros, the crowdsourced method of scleros, and AI? Where do you use scleros and where do you use AI? So lots of people are starting to do research about this from all over the world. So basically what we are doing is what we call decentralized justice, and this is built on like 3 pillars. First, it's a system which is built on the blockchain. So since it's built on the blockchain, you are sure that like nobody can tamper with the procedure. So the way in which jurors are going to be selected is like this one, and no one can change that. No one can tamper with the evidence. So this is why blockchain is important for scleros. It's based on the collective intelligence. It's basically a crowdsourced system for the solution. And the innovative part here is like the incentive system is completely different from what we are used to, right, in the ODR world. So I like to see this as an analogy with how things turn out to be in the encyclopedia business and in the financing business, right? Nobody believed in Wikipedia at the beginning, right? It's how can you build an encyclopedia with people from the internet who are anonymous, right? So yeah, turned out it worked. And now people say, wait, that Bitcoin is not really, it's not money, it's just a ledger, right? Well, people are using it as money. So we think that scleros can also be justice, and we are starting, it's new, but what we have seen so far is that it works as we expected, and we will learn much more in the way. So thank you very much.
That was a great presentation, so I'll open up the room for questions. Ruben?
So I'm curious about the appeals process. I think if I'm understanding that properly, it sounds like at a certain point, the appeals process got kind of opened up to a wider community. So is that correct? And then I guess the follow-up there is it sounded like that was also an experiment. So is that mirroring what you do in sort of a real-world situation as far as appeals?
Okay, so the appeal process, so there is a dispute, right? One party loses, she thinks it was unfair, she can appeal. She has to pay the next round of jurors, right? And it's going to be like twice as many plus 1, 3, then it goes to 7. If there is another appeal, it goes to 15. And the appeal process is very important for the game theory of the system in a way of preventing like bribery. Because like imagine like there is 3 jurors, right? And I'm a juror, we get bribed, and we vote for A, even though B should win. But like if the losing party appeals, and then the next round overturns the decision of the previous round, jurors in the first round, they lose their money. So this creates into the jurors in the first round the incentive of thinking, okay, if I get bribed, okay, this will pass, but if this is appealed, then I lose my money. So let me do a good decision in the first place, because if not, I'm likely to lose.
Right.
So the appeal system is very important as a defense mechanism for scleros, right?
Right.
So basically, you have the jurors trying to imagine how would an ideal juror vote in this situation.
Right. So I think that makes sense sort of from an economic perspective. It sounds like you're using like a Keynesian beauty contest sort of model. Is that right? And then, but it sounded like you kind of said that at a certain point, all of the jurors were debating, and it sounded like Telegram, which is a pretty public. So
yeah.
Was it just that group of jurors, or was the wider community involved?
So you can't prevent people from sharing like they are jurors, right? But what you don't know is how the other one is going to vote. And you can say, yeah, I'm this juror in this case, so I'm going to vote this way, so vote like this, so we can all make the sharing point the same point and we make money. Yeah, you can say that. I could like believe you and vote that, and then you can vote differently. I cannot go with you into the ballot box room, right? So that's the thing.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So connected with that, with a Schelling point or a focal point, part of that assumption is that there's no out-of-band communication, right? At least in terms of how Schelling was talking about it. So if you could have out-of-band communication, and it sounds like there is, what if you could make credible commitments that you are going to vote in a certain way? So, it may be that it's cheap talk to say, yeah, I'm going to vote this way, and they may or may not believe you. But what if you say, I've actually created the smart contract, so I'll lose $100 over here if I don't vote this way?
Yeah. So the image I showed before about the cuts and the bribery attempts, they were done with smart contracts. They didn't work. So people did not take the bribe anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we tested that.
I have a question. So, what do you think about justice in Claros? I mean, I've presented law schools, and sometimes I get beaten up because people say, well, you're building like a rough judge, you're delivering resolutions, but are you delivering justice? Because it's not really just about delivering an outcome and jurors sort of imagining what an ideal juror would do. Sometimes a judge does something and says, you know what, the just thing to do is this. And most people wouldn't agree with it, but I have the authority and I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this decision. Is there sort of a race to the bottom thing through game theory? I'm just wondering if that's...
Let me give you the answer you should give in the
in Stanford Law School. Yeah.
Stanford Law School. Remember, both parties entered into this voluntarily in a contract, and they said, if there is a dispute in this contract, this is going to go to this arbitrator.
So procedurally, they buy into it.
Yeah. So, then like what we know is that in the case of the exchange, for example, the owner of the exchange, they compare the results that they got with their due diligence process and what they got with Claros, and they got the same results, like much cheaper and much faster. Then about the philosophical discussion of justice, we can discuss that over a beer because it's very. I think people people don't see this as unfair. In our experience, like people who lost. And you can see it in our Telegram group. Like, I made this submission, and then I realized that it was not acceptable according to the rules. People recognize that they screw up, and only in 2 cases, I would say in 1 case, people were unhappy with how it resulted. It was the Grid Plus affair I mentioned. Let me just comment on that. So one of the rules that the exchange required for listing a token was that there was an independent audit on the token, on the code, right? And this was a good person, he complied with everything, but the audit had been done by Consensus, which was the owner of the project. So they had one unit that makes code audit, and they had the other unit was Grid Plus. So someone said, no, this is not independent audit, right? And these guys said that, Consensus audit is very independent, but there was a case for not being independent, right? So we have seen this in the end that people participating in the process saw it as a fair process.
Mm-hmm. So Roland's not here, so I'll ask, how do you make money off of this?
Remember, people need to use a token to be selected. So the cooperative Claros, which the developer of the project, sells tokens, and this is the token that people have to buy. So if there is a very big demand for Claros services in the future because it becomes a very important protocol, then there's going to be a lot of demand of tokens and a lot of revenue for the company.
So transaction fee or whatnot?
It's not a transaction, but it's kind of transaction fee,
Cool.
So as I understand it, in terms of jury selection, the only requirements are to have internet access and to be able to get the Pinker coin.
Yeah.
Correct? Sorry. In the future, if you're going to branch out and maybe focus on even specialized areas of knowledge, so let's hypothetically say a dispute is over architectural drawings for a building, for instance, would you ever branch out and have maybe a specialized panel of people who are clearly certified architects in that to kind of resolve this dispute, or would you rather kind of keep it at the threshold of just randomly selected people who have access to the currency?
The model of Claros is anyone self-selects into the right court where they want to participate, and if they don't do that, they will lose money. So it's an economic incentive for you to go into the place where you know. So there is no plan for now. We have discussed lots of times internally if should there be a wide list of like people accepted into different courses? We think for now it doesn't make too much sense. Never say never, but for now, no.
And there's been a request to type your email into chat.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do I do that?
Well, we'll help you with that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have time for one more question, if anybody.
Is the cost of becoming a jury is a function of the arbitration fee?
Yeah, it will be in larger sums. More people are going to want to arbitrate, and this will drive up it's supply and demand of jury services against the demand of arbitration services, that is the disputes coming to the platform, and supply of jury services, and from that will come the equilibrium or what you have to stake in order to be drawn. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Federico. So now we move to our second presentation by
Yeah, you'll want first,
Han
you can.
Verstrati, whose platform Autonomous. Autonomous is a formation and filing agent for the crypto and blockchain economy, incorporating entities, tokenizing their stock, and building tools to help automate funding and governance. Han will present AutoCorp, a formation service for a blockchain native Delaware LLC.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to see if I'm still connected here. Just give me 1 second. Trying to connect to the meeting.
Are you not, is,
I'm not now, but it's my computer that's stubborn here.
yeah.
Shall I do this again? It's not connecting. Hold on.
Did you try screen share?
I'm not connected. I'm not in the Zoom call. It's bumped me out. So
Me too. Yeah.
Okay,
I'll just try to log in again.
all right.
Oh, am I here now? Yes, I think I'm here now. Right? There we go.
Yay.
Right? Mm-hmm. Thank you all. So I was here, I think it was about 4 years ago, when I was trying to fall in love with a new business idea, which can be quite frustrating, like in real life, I guess, when you don't fall in love, because I had done some businesses. And I came up with this idea that we should be able to spin up companies easier than the way we currently do it. So I've been basically working on that since, and trying to automate as much as possible the process of that first mile problem, which is get yourself incorporated. Okay, and you know, we have a website. We are in 12 jurisdictions. Anybody who needs a company can come to us, and we'll help you get you set up in Cayman with a crypto hedge fund, or in Singapore with a operational entity, UK, Delaware, Wyoming, and so on. So we have a working business. We have paying clients. Most of them are from the crypto and the blockchain community. It's actually quite phenomenal how many entities these teams have needed over the last years. But we are sort of in the midst of that community and helping them set up their entities. But in the broader context, our market is actually, yes, big, actually quite big and a bit underestimated. There's 40 billion a year in setting up companies around the world. About 500,000 a year are being set up just in Delaware. So you guys sit here on the biggest jurisdiction in the world. A lot of people think that's offshore and Cayman and BVI. It's actually Delaware. There's maintenance costs. If you own a company every year, you're going to have to pay to maintain it and perhaps have directors locally and so on. So we're helping. We're in these jurisdictions, not all of them, but we do help. But we like it that it's a boring market because nobody looks at it. I think it's nice as an entrepreneur to work in a boring market. But the other thing is, it's still totally analog. It's still all paper pushing, right? If you incorporate a company in most jurisdictions, look, this is just as an example, this is the share certificate of the very first joint stock company. It was a Dutch company. I'm Dutch speaker. And so back in the early 17th century, we came up with this, although the Americans actually have a claim on the first joint stock company, we like to think it was the Dutch, and it was back in 1606, and that's the share certificate to the left. Now, the right is a share certificate of one of our clients. We hit the name, but this is a BVI company, if I'm right. And so what you're seeing is this is all still paper and certificates, and it's a space that is still mediated by these legal priests who have these sort of ancient rituals about incorporation of companies. And so the question I'm asking myself, and we're asking ourselves, is why hasn't technology come to this space yet? What is it that prevents people from inserting technology? Because, we all buy our flights now online, right? We don't use travel agents anymore. Who still has used the travel agents over the last year to book a flight? And we now see that as accepted, that we don't buy our travel through an intermediary, but we still set up companies through intermediaries. And so we, sad bunch that we are being quite obsessed about this space, we started to analyze where are the blockers? And obviously, I think Codex must come across this every time. There is inertia. There is inertia in that there are established processes, and people kind of have a sense that if you don't do it in the old way, it's not going to be legally valid. We need a lawyer involved, we need a wet signature, we need paper, and so you have that element of inertia. But the second thing is you have infrastructure. If you want to charter a company in the real world, then you're going to have some blessing from a registry. You're going to get a birth certificate, if you want, from a registry. And so governments have given monopolies to these registries to give you your birth certificate. So you cannot have a Delaware LLC without some filing at the Delaware registry. You cannot have a Cayman company without some filing in Cayman. So we kind of set ourselves this task of how are we going to remove these blockers? How are we going to compress the time and the cost to form a valid new legal entity? It was kind of an internal project that we just thought would be fun to do. And so the way we've then done it actually is when we came up with a key insight. And the key insight is actually that the first member of a company can be a cryptographic address. There is no reason why on a formation certificate I cannot put a long hexadecimal string as the first owner of an address. And so what we basically did is that we engineered what we call a test tube company. And so we're going to demo this in a second, but we have this here in an overview of 3 steps where Roland, who I didn't know at this point that he would not be here, would be sending 1 DAI, which, as you may know, is basically 1 digital US dollar. He would send that to our smart contract, which is autocorp.e through the Ethereum name server, so we don't have to use that long address. It's just autocorp.e. Autocorp.e is a master LLC in Delaware existing, right? And so that is the incubator, that's the in vitro, the actual tube that is being inseminated, sorry for the analogy, but inseminated with Roland's 1 DAI. And the third step is that a new legally valid real world LLC is being spun up that Roland can use. And he can use the name that he chose for the company. And all this happens in kind of 5 seconds. Now, we put the price of 1 DAI because, Susan, I think you're going to ask me the question, Han, how are you going to make money? We're probably going to increase that a little bit, but it may be the price of a cup of coffee rather than 1 DAI, but it's still going to be $5 because it's fully automated. There's no human intervention required whatsoever. So the result is basically that you have an instant limited liability wrapper. And the most important invention amongst a couple more in humanity, I feel, is limited liability. The fact that you can take risks, but you're only ever on the hook for the money you've put in. And so the value of having an instant limited liability wrapper is tremendous. I can spin up this LLC in a second to hold 1 asset, my IP, it could be a trading company. I can even wrap a limited liability around smart contract code. Because all these developers happily push code and it's supposedly self-executing, but what if something goes wrong? It's probably going to be seen as an unlimited partnership. Imagine that. You're an entrepreneur, you're taking humongous risks, And then the bailiff knocks on your door because your self-executing smart contract has done something that it was not supposed to do. So you want to have limited liability. That's key. So this is the point where it can all go wrong when I try to demo this. So bear with me for a second. We kind of got this ready. And I just want to share this with you. This is kind of a world premiere, I guess. Let me just refresh this. So to keep on with the analogy of the test tube and the birth of babies and so on, we started with a name. Everything starts with a name. So you've got to choose a name for your company. And funnily enough, in the United States, you do not have a publicly accessible register of names in Delaware or any of the other states. You basically rely on open source databases to check if names are already existing. For instance, if I wanted to spin up right now live a company in Delaware that's called Goldman Sachs LLC, it's now checking with the registry. Oh, I'm not sharing this. 1 second. I'm so sorry. Let me make sure that I share that screen. And there you have it. Okay, there we are. So I just tried to create a real world company called Goldman Sachs LLC. Guess what? It's obviously been rejected because there is a company in Delaware already called Goldman Sachs. But let's say I wanted to set up a company called Water Bottle LLC. We're going to check if the name is taken. No, it's not taken. So what do you see? You actually say you're ready. You can actually spin up this company. We give you a registered address in Delaware because we are formation agents in Delaware, because you do need a registered address for service for any company in any state in the United States. So we're clicking next. We're asked to, for now, connect our MetaMask. We'll have the hardware wallets as well. So let me do that. Let's now all close our eyes when I type in my password with all my crypto sitting in there. Okay, so I've connected a test wallet. I've obviously done this on a test network. And I'm basically going to now send that one DAI that I showed on the slide. Okay, it shows me a balance of 6 DAI. And when I do that, this is the moment where I inseminate that test tube. This is where the baby is going to start growing in vitro. Okay, I'm confirming this. We shouldn't close this window. This should not take a long time. This is confirmed already. Let's now just wait a little bit. You can see the transaction on Etherscan if you wanted to. Again, this is where sometimes with firewalls and university Wi-Fi's, it can go wrong, but it should hopefully work okay. Okay, there we have it. And now the only thing I have to do as a last step is activate Water Bottle LLC. And just to no misunderstanding here, this is, if this were to be done on the mainnet, this would be a real live existing company that you can start using right away. So we're activating it. We're doing one final confirm. And there we have it. It was validly formed. And as a next step, we're not going to go through the last step here. I would enter my email. I would basically get my operating agreement from my LLC. You will see that the company now has a smart contract address. So basically your whole operating agreement for that LLC is held in a operating agreement. And I can see that operating agreement on Etherscan. There it sits. And this is my operating agreement, sort of pre-populated with the name that we chose, the date of today, and very interestingly, I think, at the very bottom, we have the address that I used to send the one DAI, right? So this is how we managed in a legally valid way without having to change any of the existing laws, because as an entrepreneur, the last thing you want to do is be in an industry where you actually have to change the law before your proposition becomes valuable. We have a new LLC in Delaware. And so we kind of like the idea that we can show how indeed spinning up companies can be made a lot quicker, a lot cheaper. I've got 3 more slides, actually 2 more. The last one is my contact. Because I know you're going to be asking a number of questions, so I think I anticipated some of those. But I also wanted to give you the vision of where this could be going, right? Because people will say, Han, is this not a solution looking for, is this not inserting this blockchain in an area where maybe it's not even necessary. Just think about this for a second. You have this company born on blockchain, so on-chain from day one, which basically means that from day one, Roland's company or water bottle, the 50,000 or so shares are not just tokens in a cryptographic wallet, they are actually smart contractified. So you can start programming the equity of that company. That's step one, because you spun it up on blockchain. Then the next thing, the biggie, is funding. You know, the biggest pain point for any entrepreneur, I'm sure those of you who have gone through a funding round, is this whole paper mill of seed rounds and term sheets and so on, which by the way is 95% standardized, but we still do it all in an analog way. I think, and I'm not the only one, there's people, and I pasted some screenshots from Twitter, some leading entrepreneurs in recent Horowitz and people who build business who say, why don't we have a press of a button company that when we want to fund it, we can just blast out the equity, the securities, to anybody who's qualified to receive them, so whitelisted, accredited investors and so on. And then on the governance side, and this is touching on what you are doing, you will be able to program, for instance, that Colin and I are both directors in that company and you have majority voting rights and what have you. So the reason I'm putting this slide here is, yes, we are currently dealing with the first leg, sort of on-ramping on blockchain of this LLC. We'll commercialize this, we'll push it out live, and we know that there is a demand for these companies, but ultimately you want to deal with formation, funding, and governance of companies. So last slide, further topics for discussion. We documented this because we thought, you know, if we present at Codex, we better make sure we have some backup documents. So you can go to autocorp.autonomous.com for our Git book, and there's a number of things that I think are almost research topics in and of themselves. People may ask, what about identity? I have a company, but nobody knows that I'm the owner of a company. Not quite, because in America, and this is actually quite exceptional, you do not have to attest to your real world identity when you incorporate a company. You just, in the physical world, you just fill out a piece of paper, and I would just say Han and sign, but the registry in Delaware is never going to check whether Han exists, whether I'm a real person, where I live, and so on. So we obviously benefit from that. And what you're doing here in the States, you're basically pushing out the attestation of my identity to the point where I need to start doing real world stuff like opening a bank account, for instance. But at inception, you don't need to know who's the father or the mother of the entity, so to say. There is a very important point on limited liability. You know, this is ongoing case law. Is it entirely insulated? If my series is doing something and your series is doing something, yours is being declared bankrupt, does it affect my series? The answer is it doesn't, because that's the whole raison d'etre of this series LLC. So there's a number of issues that we've addressed, but at this point, I'd love to open it for any questions. And you can email me or look us up on Signal or Telegram. We don't use WhatsApp because we think it's being peeked into, but Telegram or Signal at Autonomous. So thanks very much. I'm happy to be back.
What API do you use to check LLC?
So there is a number of sort of voluntary databases on names. One is called Open Company, and so they keep track of all of the companies that have been registered in, for instance, Delaware and some other U.S. states. And it's a real shortcoming that there isn't a publicly accessible database where I can actually see whether a company has been already registered. You know, so you need to rely on some sort of Wikipedia type database.
Or lawyers.
Or lawyers. You can do, but it's interesting you say that, Susan, because the main reason, in our opinion, that people don't register Goldman Sachs LLC is because they're obviously afraid of being sued as a result of infringement of a trademark. And so that's why you want to be careful. We feel that we're good by having that check into that Wikipedia. We'll catch most of the names that already have been taken, but you cannot be sure. Yeah. In other countries, for instance, in the UK, where I spent most of my career, we have Companies House. You can just go onto the website, you can enter any name, and you will immediately see oh no, that name is taken. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What about spam as an issue? So, with the old paper system, it's actually really hard to create spam because you have to go through those steps, right? Now you've made it so easy. What if it's too easy for people and they can just create, 1,000 companies in 5 minutes or something like that? What happens then?
It's interesting you say that. First of all, you would be rather dumb spamming if you have to pay $5 every turn, right? So that's kind of a James Bond type villain who is happy to spend money on bad causes. So, excuse me, we don't think this is going to get spammed. But what if, I personally cherish the idea that anybody can now, in a sort of uncensored way, spin up a legal entity. Because here's what's going to happen. Tell me if you agree, is we're going to see a new wave of entrepreneurship where people are going to want to come out of big organizations, do their own thing, and they're going to need entities. We've seen it over the last years with this brave new crypto community, where they, on average, each of the teams, you showed some of the icons there, have 3-4 entities, foundations, an operating entity here. And so let everybody who needs a company have a company. And it's my personal hope that some of these developers will become a bit more careful with their smart contracts and start wrapping LLCs around their smart contracts. So I don't actually mind if thousands of companies are being spun up. Yeah.
So a couple of things. So I'm originally from New Zealand.
Yeah.
We have a place where we register companies.
Yeah.
Called the Companies Registry.
Yeah.
The North Island and South Island. Pattern with New Zealanders naming things. There was a guy. Well, actually, the companies, the issuer got in trouble because a convict in an Australian prison was able to register a company successfully within prison in Australia. It's a very, very easy to register a company. And I think that I tend to agree in terms of what you're doing is incredibly valuable. You're effectively commoditizing something that shouldn't be associated with a lot of friction.
That has actually been, if I can just add, is basically a process when owning a company was still part of a very privileged few.
Yes.
19th century JP Morgan type, and we're trying to push this down to,
The friction is needless.
Yeah.
And by unifying at the sort of the root, at the genesis of the operation, you create a common schema to allow products and services to be built up on an overlay. Insurance markets, for example, I mean, if you can contractualize this whole thing and turn it into a digital thing, you can have a litigation finance contract just sitting on top of it from day one.
We need a biz dev guy, so you're saying all the right things.
I wonder whether or not 5-10 years from now this might resemble the domain game, right?
Sure.
I've got about 20 domains, and somebody wants to buy Edify with an AI.com and the .ai. But there's been plenty of ideas that I've sort of looked for that you've got to find another domain, right?
Yep.
Do you think that we will see a kind of a market where that begins to resemble domain camping in certain jurisdictions?
Okay.
And I wonder whether or not this platform could be spread very quickly across multiple jurisdictions, so that not only could I just press a button and get a company here, but actually in every jurisdiction tomorrow, right?
There's two questions there. So let me quickly talk about the domain. And I'm going to be on my soapbox here because I think the way domain names are actually purchased, but especially managed and sold it's just mind-boggling. Nobody understands how we ever got to this point. What is a lot more interesting is what's happening with the Ethereum name services, where it's a smart contract that owns the domain. You have the private key to the smart contract. If I want to transfer that to you, I just paste my private key, I can send it. So if that's the way we're going to transfer ownership of companies, great. If I want to sell my company to you and I can just have my 50,000 founder shares sit there and transfer them via a digital blockchain transaction, knowing that I have validated my ownership through my private key because I own the private key, then I think that's a good thing. I don't think there's going to be some sort of bargain basement type thing going on here. It's going to be legit transactions of companies and their underlying assets possibly. So hopefully it won't be like a domain name registration space. Your second question, no coincidence that this image here is actually from some granite mountain in Wyoming. We love Wyoming. Wyoming is very blockchain friendly, is actually the first state registry in the United States that's recognizing that blockchain is going to be the ledger of truth of what happens in a company, right? So that's interesting because you no longer have that silo of a registry with its internal database of who is registered there. It's going to be on blockchain. You can do it, is the short answer, in jurisdictions where you don't have to know your customer up front. The last 4 years I was in Singapore, and when you incorporate a company in Singapore, what you have to do is you first have to go through a whole process of basically making attestations about who you are, submit proof of residence, submit proof of identity. So you cannot automate that because it's going to be a stop-start legal documentation process. Where you can do it is in some other very important jurisdictions. You can do it in the UK, you can do it in New Zealand, in Australia, Cayman, BVI. There's a number of jurisdictions where you can do it. But it baffles me that in some places you almost have to go through a full screening before you can actually incorporate a company. That's where it's going to be a lot more difficult to do what we're doing. But we're kind of feeling good that we're in Delaware because, again, it's 500,000 companies a year.
So if a company gets sued, if you register a company and the company gets sued, then who takes the liability?
Okay, absolutely yours. So there is nothing that in any way would filter this liability back up to the master LLC, and that's established case law. So let's say that all of us here today would have one of these LLCs hanging underneath Autocorp. The only service we provide is we have to, under the law, provide a registered address where you can service notice, right? So if you're going to be sued for whatever you've done in your LLC, there has to be an address in Delaware where a lawyer can basically say, I want to sue your LLC. But the master, that incubator, that sort of in vitro that I was talking about, right, remains entirely out of shot. And the other LLCs remain entirely out of shot. You can even be declared bankrupt with your LLC. It's not going to affect the other LLCs that we have set up under the master.
But you're registering it with a fictitious person. You don't know who the person is.
No, and in the analog world, the way it's currently done, you don't know that either. You just have a name on there, but you have no certainty whatsoever, and there's no checks at the registry level that person actually exists. The assumption that the regulators make, and I think it's actually smart and it has a lot to do with the history of the United States, is that set up that company first. Let's make that super easy. But when you start doing real stuff in the world, like for instance, you want to sell a security, well, you're going to have to let the world know who you are. So you're going to have to link your smart contract address with your real address and your real identity, which is basically you whitelist yourself. In the same way we whitelist ourselves when we buy a security token offering, or when you go to Wells Fargo and you say, I need a bank account for my LLC, they will want to know that you're the owner of that smart contract address on your certificate. Yeah, so they push it out a bit further down the line.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to make one last point.
Sure.
I'm going to push back a little bit with some criticism that I've heard in the online dispute resolution space. You're sort of radically democratizing access to the creation of these entities, which I think is a good thing. But I think it's not necessarily bond villains, I think, who would go and register lots of these for $5.
Yeah.
I think it is interesting to parallel with the domain name space. There's a lot of reasons why people would want to create a lot of these legal entities and then, sort money through them and, obfuscate their activities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do online divorce, and I've had people say to me, well, is it a good thing that you're making divorce easier?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of thinking about what are some of the downstream effects.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are a lot of companies that have already democratized this quite a bit. I mean, you go to LegalZoom, you go to incorporate.com, it's not $5, it doesn't happen online. I've incorporated businesses through those channels.
Sure.
And then once you start to make real money, then the law firm comes in and says, okay, we're going to really do this now.
Sure.
And then they do it again and they clean everything up. So I think democratizing is great because it lowers the barrier to entry. But the downstream effect of this, I think, is because just like with the dogies, I always call them dogies, doges, people are gaming it. They're testing around the edges. What can I get away with? And, if you can make it $5, people are going to start to do this, and then they're going to start to experiment. How can I abuse this new ability that I have? Sure. So I guess that's the one thing, I love what you're doing and I think it's great,
Thank you.
but we don't really know where it's going.
Yeah.
You know, like it could,
Yeah.
there may be a social cost to lowering the bar as far as you're lowering it.
And I definitely don't want to, poo-poo your concern. I share the concern. I guess my answer is going to be the same as Federico's. We should talk about this over beer because it's like an ethical dimension that you introduce, and
Let's
we
tell that
don't
to the
know
Codex
that yet.
guys.
Yeah.
Next time, beer.
We don't know the ethical dimension yet of this, and it is indeed the same question as if we make divorce easier, is it just going to lead to more divorce cases? We like to think that there's a school, if you want, within this whole decentralized movement that says everybody should be able to bank, and so you have the ability of having a wallet on your phone in Africa and participate in the economy and become an economic agent. So we like to think that this achieves a little bit the same. Will it be abused? I guess like with every tool, there's always, the knife to stab and the knife to cut the tomatoes with. So you can use it for both things, but it's a valid concern.
And, what would be your stance on free speech versus hate speech?
Say that again?
Your corporation's stance on free speech versus hate speech.
Gee, that's one I think I will refrain from answering right now. I really would need to think a little bit more about that. What you're basically saying is that what we're doing has an impact on free speech. Is that what you're saying?
Let's say Alex Jones, he got kicked out from YouTube, and you want to register it on your platform and start a new company on your platform.
Yeah. If I may make one point. If I may just make one point, right? In this research on why this has not been done before, why do we still have the travel agents that issues our airline ticket when we incorporate a company? One thing that we found out is actually technology in this space can only ever replicate due process. So we are just following due process. We are not doing anything that is somehow upsets the apple cart or pushes the boundaries of the law. We're just seeing what is the analog process, which is that travel agent, and how can we compress this in time and cost? And how do you do it? You insert technology in replicating the due process. You're not trying to change the law. And so I actually wonder why, if you ask me that question about free speech, it should then also be asked about the analog existing process. Is spinning up a company through a company registrar in Delaware touching on free speech? I don't see a sort of a qualitative difference there. Susan?
So.
Are we running out? Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Yeah, quick. So you mentioned Wyoming. One of our affiliated faculty, Oliver Goodenough, has done some legislation.
I know Oliver.
work in
I know
Vermont.
Oliver.
So I'm just curious, but we can talk after.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I met Oliver when I was here.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean,
Yeah.
has that helped? I mean, is that incentivized?
Yeah, we also had some discussions with I think it was a senator, if I remember correctly, from Vermont, who, when we first came up with this idea of spinning up entities, making it easier, was very interested, said that he was part of law panels there and so on. So we deliberately came to the United States, although I'm based in Vancouver, but we deliberately came to the States because we feel this is the market where it's actually going to work best. Canada is an interesting market, but it's so much smaller, right? And the US, we haven't even applied for a visa yet. If necessary, we will, but US is the most interesting market to do that. So Wyoming, yes. Wyoming has a bit of issues with the naming, but that's kind of a technical thing. But then there is Vermont, there is Nevada.
Yeah, I was going to say Nevada. Yeah.
You know that most of the Swiss banks now have, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure, but have offices in Nevada because you can set up a foundation. If you're non-American and you have all your assets in the foundation, it's actually the best place to now have your assets from a tax point of view and so on and so on. So the US, although a lot of people who are in the US, when they come to like a Cayman or a Singapore, they think that it has a lot more possibility. I feel that here you have a lot going for you in terms of registering companies and innovating in that space. Absolutely. Sometimes we have to say the good things as well, right?
Why not?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think we're running out of time, but thank you so much to Federico and Han. Those were both amazing presentations. Thanks for hearing from Claros and Autonomous.
Sure.
And thank you all for being here.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Very good. Thank you.